Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, I'm sharing a shocking story about the night my husband's boss crossed a line I never expected. A suggestion that changed everything for me. What happened next? You won't believe it. Stay tuned because this is one secret that almost tore my marriage apart. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss the full story. Trust me, you'll want to hear every detail. I still remember the way the envelope felt in my hand, thick, expensive, and sealed with a golden wax stamp. It wasn't the kind of thing you'd expect from your husband's corporate office. It was almost royal. It had been a long Thursday. I was folding laundry when my husband, Daniel, walked in, holding the envelope with an odd smile on his face. "Guess who invited us to dinner?" he said, waving it like a prize. I looked up, a little confused. "Dinner? Who?" "My boss, Mr. Thornton, this Saturday, at his place." Immediately, I felt a flutter in my chest. Mr. Thornton was a name I had heard more than I had seen. Daniel spoke of him like most people speak of ghosts, powerful, mysterious, always watching. The CEO of the tech company Daniel worked for, he was notoriously private. I'd never seen a photo of his wife, never met his kids, if he had any. Just rumors and reverence. "He's hosting something?" I asked, raising a brow. Daniel nodded. "A private dinner. Just a few couples from work. He's never done this before. It's a big deal. He said it's special." That word, special, sat uncomfortably in my stomach. Still, I smiled. "Well, I guess we better dress up." The next 2 days passed in a blur. I tried on 5 different dresses before settling on a navy blue gown with subtle sparkles. Daniel had his suit dry cleaned and polished his shoes until they gleamed like glass. He seemed excited, nervous, too, kept checking his watch and adjusting his tie. Saturday evening arrived. As we drove through the upscale neighborhood on the edge of town, I stared out the window, watching as the houses grew bigger, fancier, and farther apart. When we finally pulled into Mr. Thornton's driveway, I was stunned. It wasn't just a house. It was a mansion, gated, guarded, with perfectly manicured gardens glowing under soft path lights. A valet took our car. We walked up a marble staircase, flanked by 2 massive lion statues. Everything screamed power. Inside, the ambiance was just as intimidating. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above a grand staircase. Live classical music played from a corner where a string quartet sat dressed in black. A butler took my coat. Daniel's hand gently found mine, comforting, but slightly sweaty. We were led into a large room where only 3 other couples were mingling, sipping wine and making quiet conversation. And then I saw him. Mr. Thornton, tall, salt and pepper hair, sharp jawline, impeccably tailored suit. His presence was undeniable. He wasn't talking, he was observing. Every movement he made felt deliberate, controlled. When he noticed us, his expression shifted into a warm, practiced smile. He walked over, extending a hand to Daniel. "Daniel, glad you could make it," he said in a deep, smooth voice. "And this must be your lovely wife." His eyes settled on me. There was a pause, just long enough to feel strange. "I'm honored to meet you," I said, smiling politely, extending my hand. He shook it, firmly. His gaze lingered. I couldn't tell if it was admiration or assessment. As the evening went on, we mingled with the other couples. Laughter, wine, and elegant hors d'oeuvres filled the space. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, not by everyone. Just by him. Later, as we sat down for dinner under a massive chandelier, Mr. Thornton raised a toast. His eyes found mine for a fraction of a second before he spoke. "To new connections," he said, lifting his glass. "And to doors that open when you least expect them. I smiled politely, but something inside me stirred, something cold, instinctive. I didn't know it then, but that dinner would change everything. The dining room was something out of a movie. A massive mahogany table stretched across the space like a runway, adorned with flickering candles, crystal goblets, and silverware so polished I could see my reflection in the spoons. The ceiling above was hand-painted with a Renaissance mural, cherubs and clouds swirling in a sky of gold. I felt like I had stepped into another world. A world where power didn't need to speak loudly, it whispered in chandeliers and velvet drapes. Daniel and I were seated near the center, just across from Mr. Thornton himself. To his right sat a sleek, red-haired woman I hadn't seen before. She looked at him like he hung the moon. I would have guessed she was his wife, but there was no warmth between them, only performance. As the staff poured wine and unveiled the first course, I tried to relax. Small talk buzzed around the table, business strategies, vacation homes, luxury cars. I was the only one here who didn't speak that language fluently. Still, I nodded and smiled, playing my part. Mr. Thornton, however, kept breaking the flow. Not with his words, but with his eyes. Every few minutes, I'd feel it again, his gaze. Focused. Calculated. He wasn't ogling. No, it was subtler than that. It was the kind of look a chess player gives the board before making a decisive move. Between courses, he leaned forward and addressed me directly. "So, Emma," he said, swirling his wine glass lazily. "Daniel tells me you're a writer." I smiled, a bit caught off guard. "Yes. Well, trying to be." His smile deepened. "Trying implies doubt. I don't see doubt when I look at you." I blinked, unsure of how to respond. Daniel laughed awkwardly beside me. "She's being modest. She's actually published a few pieces online." "Impressive," Mr. Thornton said, never taking his eyes off me. "Creative minds are rare in rooms like this. Makes them stand out, shine a little brighter." It was a compliment, but it felt too pointed. Like it came with invisible strings. The red-haired woman beside him took a long sip of wine, her expression unreadable. Dessert arrived, chocolate mousse with raspberry drizzle, but I barely touched it. My stomach was a tangled mess. Around me, the conversation grew looser as more wine flowed. The other couples laughed louder, leaned in closer. But I couldn't join in. Because I could feel something building. It was in the way Mr. Thornton's questions grew more personal. How he asked about my ambitions. My routine. Whether I liked structure or freedom. The way he used those words felt less like curiosity and more like evaluation. At one point, Daniel excused himself to take a call from the office. Some urgent system glitch. Mr. Thornton watched him go, then turned back to me with that same composed smile. "Your husband's very devoted," he said. "He is," I replied, forcing a smile. "Work never stops." "No, it doesn't," he said, then paused. "And sometimes, neither should opportunity." There it was again, that cryptic tone, the way he layered meaning into mundane phrases. I nodded politely, unsure where this was going. The music shifted, softer now. The red-haired woman stood and announced she needed fresh air. The other guests slowly drifted into the sitting room for post-dinner drinks. I stood too, ready to follow the crowd. But then Mr. Thornton placed a hand lightly on my arm. "Emma," he said quietly. "Would you mind if I had a word? In private." His voice was calm, gentle, even. But the moment was charged, like the air before a lightning strike. I hesitated. Everything in me screamed to say no. But I heard myself say, "Sure." And just like that, I followed him toward a quiet hallway, leaving behind the candles, the laughter, and, unknowingly, my comfort zone. The hallway was dimly lit, lined with oil paintings and gold frames and the faint scent of cologne and polished wood. My heels clicked against the marble floor with every uncertain step. Mr. Thornton walked just ahead, calm, confident, the kind of man who didn't ask questions without already knowing the answers. He led me to a study tucked behind a set of double doors. It was quiet, too quiet. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with leather-bound volumes, and a single decanter of whiskey sat waiting beside 2 glasses. The fireplace crackled softly, casting shadows on the mahogany desk between us. "Please," he said, gesturing to a chair near the hearth. "Make yourself comfortable." I sat down, trying to hold my composure. He poured himself a drink, then offered me one. "No, thank you," I said politely, folding my hands in my lap. He raised an eyebrow but didn't press. He sat across from me, crossed his legs, and took a slow sip before finally speaking. "You know, Emma, most people in my world, they play games. Polite, clever games with rules they pretend to follow." I nodded slowly, unsure where this was going. "But you," he said, eyes narrowing slightly, "you don't strike me as a woman who likes games." I gave a soft laugh, more out of tension than agreement. "I prefer clarity, if I'm being honest." "Good," he said, leaning forward. "Then let me be clear." There was a pause. My breath caught. "Your husband has potential," he began, his tone measured. "He's sharp, loyal, eager to grow. I've kept an eye on him for over a year now." I nodded cautiously, unsure what this had to do with me. "And loyalty, Emma, in my world, is currency. It opens doors, accelerates careers, but there are different kinds of loyalty." I didn't respond. I could feel something tightening in my chest, some invisible line we were creeping toward. He continued, "There's a promotion coming, high level, executive tier, and your husband's name is on the short list. But to be candid, there are others. Men with more experience, deeper pockets." I swallowed. "So what does this have to do with me?" He smiled, that same calm, unreadable smile that had unnerved me at dinner. "I believe in testing potential," he said. "Not just in the boardroom, but in how someone navigates opportunity. Risk, trust." He stood and walked toward the window, swirling his glass as he stared out into the dark garden. "Let me be blunt, Emma," he said, without turning. "I'm offering your husband something most people spend a lifetime chasing. But for me to be absolutely certain he's ready, I need to know that the people around him are equally capable of discretion. Of loyalty." The words hit like cold water. "You're saying, what, exactly?" I asked, though part of me already knew. He turned back to me, his gaze sharper now. "I'm saying this," he said, walking closer. "If you and I were to spend some time together, privately, off the record, it would tell me a lot about who Daniel really is. About who you really are. And I assure you, no one would ever know. Not even him. Just a moment between 2 adults who understand the value of ambition." I stared at him, stunned. The room spun slightly, but I kept my expression still. "That's not a test," I said quietly. "That's manipulation." His smile didn't waver. "Call it what you like. I call it clarity." I stood. My hands were shaking, but I clenched them into fists at my side. "I think I should find my husband now." He didn't move to stop me. He simply raised his glass. "To new doors, Emma," he said, softly. "They don't always open the way you expect." I walked out of the room without another word, my heart pounding, my skin burning with rage, shame, and something else I hadn't fully named yet, fear. I walked quickly down the hallway, feeling like I needed to breathe but not knowing where to find air. My heels echoed like gunshots against the marble floor as I made my way back toward the parlor, trying to compose myself before anyone noticed the panic rising inside me. When I reached the main room, it was almost empty. A few guests had already left. Daniel was still on his phone in a side room, pacing as he spoke in a hushed voice. I stood in the doorway and watched him for a second. He didn't even notice I was there. I felt nauseous. How could he not have sensed something? Or worse, what if he had? I quietly stepped outside onto the terrace, hoping the fresh air would clear my head. The garden stretched out like something from a dream, symmetrical hedges, marble statues, a pond reflecting the moonlight. I leaned against the stone railing and let the cool breeze hit my face. And then, he appeared again. Mr. Thornton. He was behind me before I even heard his footsteps. I stiffened. I hope I didn't upset you, he said smoothly, as if we were discussing dinner wine. I turned slowly. What do you think you just did? He raised his hands in mock surrender. I was merely presenting an opportunity. I never make anyone do anything they don't want to do. I stared at him, trying to read the truth behind that face, polished, elegant, utterly without remorse. I want to be very clear, I said, voice trembling. I am not that kind of woman. And you've crossed a line you had no right to even approach. He didn't flinch. Instead, he stepped closer, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial murmur. Emma, you're smart. Smarter than most. So I'll only say this once. He reached into the inside pocket of his blazer and pulled out a small envelope. Slim. Clean. He held it out like it was nothing. But the weight of it was immense. I'm not asking you for anything tonight, he said. But if you ever change your mind, if you ever feel stuck, unsure, or tired of being the woman behind the man, open this. I didn't take it. Open it and what? I asked. He smiled. Let's just say, you'd have access to something most people only dream of. A grant for your writing. A publishing deal. A space in Paris. I have connections that can turn passion into profit overnight. No strings. No public trace. I stood frozen, staring at the envelope like it was poisoned. You think I'd trade integrity for success? I asked coldly. No, he said. I think you already have integrity. That's what makes this interesting. That word, interesting, curled in the air like smoke. Disgust mixed with disbelief swirled inside me. At that moment, Daniel emerged onto the terrace, looking relieved to see me. There you are, he said, brushing a hand against my back. They got the server running again. Sorry that took so long. Mr. Thornton stepped back like nothing had happened. Daniel, he said warmly. You've got a sharp one here. Keep her close. Daniel laughed, clueless. That's the plan. I wanted to scream, shake him, tell him what had just happened while he was busy putting out tech fires. But I didn't. Not yet. I stayed quiet during the car ride home. Stared out the window. My reflection in the glass looked like someone else. Someone who'd just been offered a glimpse behind the curtain, and hated what she saw. That envelope, still in his hand, haunted me. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew this wasn't over. Mr. Thornton didn't make empty gestures. He made moves, and he had just made his. The car was quiet, unnervingly so. Daniel drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting on the gear shift, tapping his thumb to some rhythm only he could hear. The hum of the tires on the road was the only sound between us. I stared straight ahead, watching the darkness blur past the windshield. Streetlights flickered by in hypnotic pulses. Each one flashed against my face like a spotlight, exposing emotions I was trying desperately to hide. Daniel finally broke the silence. So, that was something. Huh? I turned to look at him. Something? He chuckled. I mean, that house. That guy. Did you see the cigar humidor in his study? It was like something out of a mafia movie. I swallowed hard. Yeah, I saw it. You seemed quiet toward the end. Everything okay? I hesitated. Part of me wanted to scream. He tried to proposition me. Your boss just offered me a deal for my body, Daniel. He tested my dignity like it was a product on a shelf. But instead, I said, just tired. He nodded, accepting it too quickly. Tired makes sense. These kinds of events wear you out. All the fake smiles and handshakes. God, I hope I didn't talk too much about work. I wanted to make a good impression. You did, I said softly, watching him. He seemed so oblivious. Or was he? That question sat like a boulder in my chest. Thornton seemed really interested in you, Daniel added after a beat. Kept talking about how insightful you were. Said you had depth. I looked at him sharply. Did he say that? Yeah. Said you had a certain presence. I mean, I get it. You're smart and beautiful. It's hard not to notice. I flinched at his choice of words. Hard not to notice. Was Daniel just naive, or was there more? I didn't answer. I went back to staring out the window. He pulled into our driveway and turned off the engine. We sat in the parked car, the hum of silence louder now than the ride itself. He leaned back, stretching his neck. Well, he said with a tired smile. If nothing else, I think tonight might have put me in a good place with him. That promotion could really be happening. I closed my eyes. He had no idea. Or maybe he did. I got out of the car, my legs heavy beneath me, and walked slowly to the front door. Daniel followed, fumbling for the keys. As we stepped inside, everything felt too normal. The lamp we always left on in the hallway. The faint scent of cinnamon from the plug-in air freshener. The quiet hum of the fridge. Home. But I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel grounded. I felt cracked. I went to the bathroom, shut the door, and leaned against it with trembling fingers. In the mirror, my reflection looked pale, almost foreign. My lipstick had faded. My eyes were dull. I felt like I had aged a decade in one evening. I turned on the tap and splashed cold water on my face, hoping it would clear the fog. It didn't. That envelope. That offer. That smirk. Doors don't always open the way you expect them to. I didn't sleep that night. Daniel snored softly beside me, unaware of the war going on inside my head. I stared at the ceiling, replaying every word. Every glance. Every possibility. Was Daniel really in the dark? Or had he set me up, consciously or not? By dawn, I knew I couldn't keep this to myself. I needed to talk to someone. Someone outside of this house. Someone who could help me make sense of the lines that had been crossed. There was only one person who came to mind. My best friend, Lydia. By morning, my nerves were raw. I hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, and I couldn't bear to look Daniel in the eye. He asked if I was feeling sick. I nodded and said I needed some fresh air. That wasn't a lie, just not the whole truth. I got in my car and drove. Not to work, not to the store, to Lydia's house. Lydia had been my best friend since college. A blunt, no-nonsense woman with the kind of fierce loyalty you can't buy or fake. She was also one of the only people who truly knew me, my dreams, my insecurities, and the way I overanalyze everything until it breaks. She answered the door in pajama pants and a messy bun, coffee in hand, her dog barking somewhere behind her. Whoa, she said, eyes widening. You look like you've seen a ghost. I wish I had, I muttered. She stepped aside. Come in. I'll make you tea. You're not leaving until you tell me everything. I sat on her couch while she disappeared into the kitchen. The cozy smell of cinnamon and citrus hung in the air. A stark contrast to the chill that had followed me from Thornton's mansion. When she returned, I was still staring blankly at the wall. Okay, she said, sitting cross-legged beside me, placing a warm mug in my hands. Talk. Slowly. And I did. I told her everything. The invitation. The dinner. The study. The envelope. The proposition. I watched as her expression shifted from curious to stunned to furious. By the time I reached the part about the offer, she was gripping her coffee cup so hard I thought it might shatter. "That sick bastard," she finally said. "Are you serious? He actually said that to you?" I nodded, ashamed. "And Daniel? What did he say when you told him?" I hesitated. "I haven't yet." Lydia blinked. "Wait, you didn't tell him?" "I wanted to," I said quickly. But something stopped me. He seemed so calm. Like he didn't sense anything. And when he said Thornton complimented me, I started wondering, what if he knew? What if he's part of it somehow? Lydia narrowed her eyes. "You think he set you up?" "I don't know. Maybe not intentionally. But maybe he's been pressured. Maybe he knew Thornton would make a move and thought I could handle it. Or maybe he just didn't care." She was quiet for a long moment. "Listen," she said carefully. "You have to tell him. Because if you don't, it'll eat you alive. And if he did know something, you deserve that truth. But don't go into that conversation unarmed." I frowned. "Unarmed how?" "Knowledge is power," she said. "You think this guy is used to manipulating people? Then maybe you need to understand how he's done it before. See if there's a pattern. You think he's done this to other women?" Lydia raised an eyebrow. "Men like him don't do things once. They do them because they've gotten away with it before." The thought made my skin crawl. "Start digging," she said. Quietly. "Check out employee reviews. Old press. Talk to spouses if you can find them. See what floats to the surface. Because once you know the truth, you'll know what to do with it." I nodded slowly, heart pounding. Lydia was right. I couldn't let this poison sit in silence. But before I confronted Daniel, I had to uncover the full extent of what, or who, I was dealing with. Because something told me this story was much, much bigger than one dinner. I left Lydia's house with more than just advice. I left with resolve. Whatever web I had stepped into at that dinner, I needed to untangle it piece by piece before it closed around me completely. When I got home, Daniel was still at work. I had the place to myself, and for once, silence felt like an ally. I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and began my quiet investigation. First, I searched Mr. Thornton's name along with his company. The results were mostly glossy, magazine features, keynote speeches, charity events, and industry awards. On the surface, he was the perfect executive, polished, philanthropic, and powerful. But I kept digging. I tried employee forums next, anonymous ones where people shared their real thoughts about management. That's when I started seeing the cracks. There were a few vague posts, years old, alluding to inappropriate advances by someone in upper leadership. Words like hostile environment, favoritism, manipulative meetings after hours. None of the posts named names. But the descriptions? They all pointed toward Thornton. Then I found something else. A blog post written under a pseudonym. A woman claiming she had once been married to a man who worked under a well-respected tech CEO. The story she told made my skin crawl. She said the CEO had invited them both to a party, taken a special interest in her, and later tried to isolate her with promises of opportunity. Sound familiar? She refused, she said. But her husband's promotion mysteriously vanished a week later. And their marriage? It never recovered. I kept reading, heart pounding. There were more whispers like that. Untraceable patterns. Promotions that went to people who were suddenly more involved. Quiet firings of employees whose spouses had clashes with management. This wasn't just a fluke. Thornton was a predator. He used power like a scalpel, precise, quiet, and almost undetectable. And he didn't need proof to ruin someone. All he needed was suspicion, fear, silence, and maybe, complicity. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. My fingers were trembling. If I confronted Daniel with this, what would he say? Would he be shocked, defensive, or, worst of all, casually accepting? What if he'd known this was the game all along? That thought hit harder than any of Thornton's words. Suddenly, I remembered the envelope. The one Mr. Thornton had offered me. Had he slipped it into my purse when I wasn't looking? I rushed to the hallway, grabbed my bag, and turned it upside down on the kitchen table. There it was, slim, white, unmarked. I picked it up like it might explode. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside, there was a single business card. No logo, just an address, Paris, and a handwritten note on the back. In case you ever decide to choose yourself. Choose myself? Is that what he called it? Choosing myself would have meant walking out of that mansion untouched. Choosing myself was the decision I made when I didn't take his bait. But he thought he owned the definition of empowerment. He thought he defined the terms of success. And now, holding that card in my hand, I realized something else. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. I was angry, and that anger wasn't going to stay quiet. It was time to talk to Daniel. To look him in the eye and ask the question I'd been dreading. Did you know? Because the silence between us could no longer carry the weight of this truth. When Daniel got home that evening, I was already waiting for him. Not in the kitchen, not curled up on the couch like I usually was after a long day, but sitting stiffly at the dining table, the white envelope in front of me like evidence in a trial. He walked in, loosened his tie, and glanced at me with a soft smile. Hey, babe, feeling better? I didn't answer right away. I just looked at him. Really looked. Sit down, I said quietly. He hesitated, then obeyed, his brow furrowing. What's going on? I took a breath. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. Daniel, I need to ask you something. And I need you to be completely honest with me. He blinked. Okay, did you know what Mr. Thornton was going to say to me at that dinner? His face froze. What? What are you talking about? I narrowed my eyes. Did you know he was going to proposition me? Offer me something in exchange for your promotion? Daniel's face drained of color. He laughed, a short, nervous sound, but his eyes didn't match the tone. Emma, what? No, what are you even saying? He took me into his study. Alone, I continued. He offered me a deal. He said if I spent time with him, privately, it would benefit your career. He gave me this. I slid the envelope across the table. Daniel didn't touch it. He stared at it like it might bite. You're serious? He asked quietly. Yes. He ran a hand through his hair. I had no idea. I swear to God, Emma. I knew he liked you. He said you were impressive, but I thought he meant it in a networking sense. Not that. I wanted to believe him. I really did, but something in his voice didn't sit right. He complimented you a lot, he said slowly. Said you had potential. I didn't think it was. I mean, I thought he was trying to help us. Help us? I echoed. You really believe that's what this is? He looked away. I didn't know anything, okay? But maybe I ignored a few signs. Maybe I didn't want to see them. There it was. The quiet admission. You were willing to look the other way if it meant getting ahead. I said, the betrayal crawling up my throat. You let me walk into that house blind. Alone. And now you want to pretend you're shocked? I didn't think he'd actually do something like that. Daniel snapped. I thought he respected you. I slammed my hand on the table. He doesn't respect me, Daniel. He sees me as a transaction. A pawn. And you, whether you meant to or not, put me in that position. He stood, pacing now. I was under pressure, Emma. This promotion would change everything for us. I thought if you impressed him, it might tip the scale. Impressed him? I said sharply. Or entertained him? He stopped in his tracks, guilt etched across his face. You're right, he said softly. I was selfish. I didn't protect you. I was so focused on proving myself, I forgot what matters. Tears stung my eyes. You forgot me. The silence between us was heavy. We both knew something had cracked, something that might not be fixable. I can quit, he said suddenly. I'll report him. I'll walk away. But the damage had already been done. This isn't just about Thornton, I said. It's about trust. And right now, I don't know if I can trust you. He nodded, jaw clenched, eyes downcast. What do you want me to do? I looked at him for a long time. I want you to think about what kind of man you want to be. And I need time to think about whether I can still stand beside you. I picked up the envelope and walked to the bedroom, leaving him alone with the weight of his choices. Days passed like a slow, heavy fog between Daniel and me. The silence was deafening, each unspoken word carving a deeper divide. I kept thinking about what he had said, the admission, the guilt, but something still felt off. Like a shadow lurking just out of sight. One evening, unable to bear the distance any longer, I confronted him again. Daniel, I said, voice steady but cold. There's something you're not telling me. Something you're hiding. He looked away, hands in his pockets. The weight of the truth was pressing down on him, and I could see it in his eyes. All right, he finally said, exhaling slowly. You deserve the truth. I braced myself. It wasn't just Thornton who was watching us, Daniel began. There are things about that place, things about the company that I didn't want you to know. Things I didn't want to face. What things? I pressed. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, frustration and shame mixing in his gaze. Thornton's methods aren't new. He's got a system, a way of controlling people, especially the ones close to him. If you don't play by his rules, you get pushed out. But if you do play, there's always a price. I swallowed hard. What kind of price? Daniel looked me dead in the eyes. There have been rumors, Emma, about wives, girlfriends, women who've been pulled into situations they never wanted, and men who turned a blind eye because they were too afraid to lose everything. Are you saying you knew about this before the dinner? I asked, voice barely above a whisper. He nodded slowly. I was offered a deal once, he admitted. Not the same kind of deal, but close. I turned it down, but that made me a target. Thornton's men started whispering things, making sure I knew the consequences of saying no. That's why I needed this promotion so badly, to prove I was still valuable. I felt like the ground beneath me cracked. So you knew exactly what was going to happen that night, I said, my voice trembling with anger. And you let me go anyway. Daniel's shoulders slumped. I thought I was protecting you by keeping you in the dark. I wanted to handle it. But I see now how wrong I was. The betrayal wasn't just from Mr. Thornton anymore. It was from Daniel, the man I had loved and trusted. But why didn't you tell me? Why hide it? I demanded. Because I was scared, he whispered. Scared of losing my job, my career, us. Tears welled in my eyes, but this time, they were tears of fury, not sorrow. I'm not your secret, I said. Standing tall despite the ache in my chest. I'm not a pawn in your game, Daniel. He reached out, but I stepped back. This changes everything, I said firmly. I need time. Time to figure out who I am, without the shadows of your choices hanging over me. That night, I packed a small bag and left the house. Not forever, at least, not yet, but far enough to breathe. As I closed the door behind me, I felt a strange mix of loss and liberation. Because sometimes, the deepest betrayal comes not from strangers, but from those closest to us. The first morning after I left, the air felt different, lighter, somehow. I woke up in my small rented apartment, sunlight spilling through the window, birds chirping outside. No familiar sounds of Daniel's routine. No shadow of Thornton's mansion looming over my thoughts. I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. Not yet. I spent the day walking through the city streets, breathing in the noise and chaos that once felt overwhelming but now felt alive. I stopped at a small cafe, ordered a black coffee, and pulled out my notebook. The one I hadn't touched since before the dinner invitation. For hours, I wrote. I wrote about fear, betrayal, strength, and the kind of courage it takes to say no when everything around you says yes. I wrote about the price of silence and the freedom in speaking out. By evening, my hands ached but my heart felt lighter. That night, Daniel called. His voice was shaky, full of apologies and promises. He said he understood why I left, how wrong he'd been, how ready he was to make things right. But I knew I couldn't just go back. Not yet. Not without change. Real, honest change. I needed to stand for myself first. In the following weeks, I blocked the toxic voices from my life. I cut off contact with Thornton and his world, refusing any calls or messages. I stopped answering Daniel's texts when they were filled with guilt and excuses. Instead, I focused on me. I applied for writing residency abroad, the kind of opportunity I dreamed of but never dared to chase. I connected with other writers, joined groups that celebrated strength and survival, and began rebuilding my sense of self. Every step was painful. Every decision was a battle against doubt and fear. But with every small victory, I grew stronger. One afternoon, as I sat by a park bench watching the sun filter through the trees, I thought back to that night in the mansion. The offer, the silence, the betrayal. And I smiled, because I had refused to be a pawn. I had chosen my own path. Doors do open in unexpected ways. But sometimes, the door you need to open is the one inside yourself. Thank you so much for watching and listening to my story. Sometimes life throws us into situations we never saw coming, and it's how we respond that defines us. If you've ever faced a tough choice or felt betrayed, remember you're not alone. And there's always a way forward. If this story resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss an update. I'll see you in the next video. Stay strong and take care.